Hey everyone, it's Jenny Colosico and I'm joining you today with two cards that focus on a technique that I absolutely love. It's Ombre sentiment embossing. So you can see on these two cards, the sentiment is the main focal point, and I'm going to show you the easiest way to get that cool ombre look effect on your die cuts. For the backgrounds on the cards, I used embossing ink with stencils. So to get this look, you're first off going to need a panel of 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch cardstock. I'm using red here. I'm treating it with my powder bag. That prevents any static cling and stops any embossing powder sticking where we don't want it to go. The stencils I'm using today are by Alexandra Renke. I love these. They're both similar. This one's called Heart in the Middle. And I actually didn't stick it down here. I'm just using a piece of copy paper behind my cardstock, which I've just added with temporary adhesive on the back. I'm laying my stencil over the top and I'm pushing down pretty hard with my embossing ink pad here. That's only because the stencil has such small spaces in it. For a more open stencil, you wouldn't have to apply so much pressure. And I'm just going over the entirety of the stencil and making sure that I have the pattern in the background. I've removed my stencil and now I'm going to do some tone-on-tone embossing. So I've got some primary red apple embossing powder by Wow, which is a really nice bright shiny red colour, and then I'm going to heat it with my Wow embossing heat tool. For those that are interested and have this heat tool, I'm using heat setting number 2. This embossing powder is slightly translucent, so it's not fully opaque on dark cardstock, but I really like the tone-on-tone colour it gives. It's a little more subtle than if you used clear. There are tints of red in it, but you could get the similar effect with clear. Now I'm just creating my second card background here as well in the exact same way. This is another stencil by Alexandra Renke, which is called Dotted Stars, and I'm using Mint Macaroon embossing powder by Wow, which is a mix of shiny light blue, pale blue, and little bits of mint in it. It's really, really pretty, and using it on this light blue cardstock is again similar tone on tone. You get this nice pearly blue finish in the background and I love it. So for the sentiments, I'm using the Mega dies from Altenew, and for my first card I'm using the Mega U die, which I've die cut from the new Wow embossing cardstock, which is fab for embossing and it really holds up well with minimal warping. And I'm liberally smushing my embossing ink all over the die cut, getting it good and coated. I'm then flipping over the copy paper I have in the background and I'm going to add rose gold embossing powder, which is a beautiful rose gold colour. It's more brown and pinky than I've seen on other rose golds. It's really, really pretty. Definitely one to add to your collection, even if you have got many other rose golds. This one is a little different. I should know, I've got lots of them. So I've coated it completely, and you can always go back in and dip it if it's not fully coated. And I like to hold down my sentiments when I'm doing all over embossing with a pokey tool just in the middle of a space, and that way if you use tweezers you often miss a bit when you're embossing and there's an imprint of the tweezers left. So if you use a pokey tool and hold it down that way, so if it does blow away, the pokey tool is going to stop it getting anywhere. I'm then adding another layer in the exact same way, and I've sped this up a little bit, and that just makes it a little thicker, and you need a little bit more powder on there to play with for this next step. So I'm going back to the primary apple red, and to ink up my sentiment for the third time, I'm only going a third to a half of the way up. So I'm using my ink pad. Remember that there is an indentation on the ink pad underneath, so you need to go up a little higher than you really think you do, just to make sure that you get all the areas covered that you want to. And then I'm adding over the top the primary apple red. And don't worry if you do what I just did there, which is dunk it all over the rest of the die cut, because we haven't added embossing ink there, so it's not going to stick. If there's any areas you missed, you can just go back in with the embossing ink pad. Another good way to do this would be with the new Renke, has a roller ball on top. I'm going to be playing with that in another video, but For those of you who've only got the ink pad, you can absolutely do it this way. And if you get any sticking where you don't want it, you can just remove it with an old paintbrush. So I'm holding down the die cut again in the same way, and you see it wanted to escape there and my pokey tool didn't let it. And I'm heating up the red powder. So when it's melted, we're going to go back in and add a second layer in the same way we did again. Don't worry if you can't exactly line up the lines, that's not going to matter. So I'm going to show you this trick that gets you that ombre look without the harsh line that you're going to see there. So you'll heat it in the normal way, and then when that's melted, keep heating. Focus on the bits where those lines are between the rose gold here and the red apple. And what you'll find is all those 4 layers that you've added will melt together, and some of the rose gold will seep into the red. And in doing that and holding the heat down, don't burn it. I recommend setting 1 for this if you have got this heat tool because it's a little gentler. But they'll melt together and you'll get that more subtle ombre look as the rose gold bleeds into the red, and it's really, really, really cool technique. And this is the finished card. I added a sentiment by Simon Says Stamp, some jewels from Honeybee, and also some stickers from, I think they are crepe paper. So I'm going to show you the blue card, how I made that. I'm using the Thank You die from Altenew, and I'm covering it in the exact same way with embossing ink. This time I'm using embossing glitter. This colour is Singing in the Rain, which I don't know how to describe this colour. I guess it's like a cream glitter with clear glitter, and it's just super sparkly in real life. It's really different. I've not seen anything else like this. And I've completely coated it in the same way, and I'm going to do 2 layers again. So here you'll see this is 2 layers. And now we're going to come back in with our mint macaroon. And this will work in the exact same way that the U worked. So we're using embossing glitter and a pastel blue here. We're not using primary red and metallic, but it works in the exact same way. It's just a little bit more subtle. So you can do this with any colours you want to. And I'm heating it up, just this first layer as I normally would, and then going back in with the second layer and heating it up, focusing on those areas. You have to be a little bit more careful with embossing glitter that you don't burn it, but focusing on those areas where the 2 colours join, and you get this subtle ombre look. So I'm going to quickly show you how I finished the blue card. The red one was very similar. I'm using these dies from Studio Katia. It's the Dotted Patterns Set 3, and I used the largest die to die cut out each of the panels. I've then added foam tape on the back of the word dies. Took a little bit of time. I used the Doris foam strips for the thank you because it's quite thin. And then I'm backing the panel onto the Nina Solar White £110 card base. And I'm using this big thanks set from Simon Says Stamp and inking up the sentiment and stamping it onto the Wow Embossing Cardstock in stone blue ink by Catherine Pooler, which I thought coordinated well with the mint macaroon and the blue cardstock. I'm then being really lazy and using my scissors to trim it out and using a Doris foam strip to adhere it down onto the card panel. And as a finishing touch, I'm adding some of the blue crystals from the Honeybee Stamps Unicorn Crystals mix. I actually used the same mix. You can see them off to the left there. They have red in them as well for my red card. And here's a quick look back at the 2 cards. So that completes my cards for today. I hope you've enjoyed. If you did, be sure to subscribe to the channel and press the bell to be reminded when we have new videos. Thanks very much for watching. Have an awesome day. Bye!